The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, President Trump meets with Kim Jong-un. Also, he disses Trudeau. What does this mean? And then on a local front, the NYCHA scandal, a big scandal affecting New York City. We'll talk about that, plus a whole lot more on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective which shines a light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for watching. You can join us here on Perspectives every week live here on BronxNet's Channel 67, as well as you can catch us on the World Wide Web at bronxnet.org. You can catch some back episodes of Perspectives, and we invite you, stay connected to us. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my professional page, Daren C. Jaime, and there you can get some inspiration as well. But let us know, and if you share your perspective, you never know, it just might make it onto the set of this show. Well, coming up, it's been a historic week when it comes to the Kim Jong-un, President Donald Trump, Canadian President Trudeau. A lot can be said. That a lot is going on across the world and a lot of questions, and a lot of things are still up in the air. What does it all mean? And whether or not the meeting with the North Korean leader actually fleshes out to mean anything. Was it good? Was it bad? And then on the local front, we're going to talk a little about the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. Many residents affected by this latest bombshell that's actually been released coming out. And so here to break all of this down for us, we welcome now our political analyst, friend JC Polanco.
How are you?
Esquire as well. And we thank you for coming and sharing with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, listen, let's talk about local stuff first, then we'll get to the national stuff. First of all, the NYCHA scandal.
Yeah.
A lot can be said. It's found out that, NYCHA withheld information, lied about some critical information. First of all, for any of our viewers who may not be familiar with it, it affects the Bronx, it affects Manhattan, it affects all across New York City. How major is this? And let's walk people through exactly what happened.
Listen, we have over 400,000 people that live in New York City housing. And for many, many decades, these people have been living in some of the most deplorable conditions. Crime-infested neighborhoods, crime-infested areas that are food deserts, and many people have been stuck there for generations. One of the things when I ran for office, I talked about privatizing NYCHA, giving people an opportunity to own their own units. And during last year's election cycle, we were studying what was going on in housing, and we were looking at the conditions. We looked at the mold, the lead, and all of the other things that were happening in NYCHA, and it didn't really get too much traction. Well, it turns out that the week after the election, the Department of Investigation unleashes a scathing report. And in that report, it was clear that there was rampant corruption at NYCHA. There was falsifications of lead testing, mold testing, and other life-threatening conditions. We even had children that were exposed to high level of lead, and we did not hear about that until after the election. So Monday, there was a settlement between the federal government and NYCHA, where the city has been ordered to put in $2 billion worth of our taxpayer money to fix what's going on in NYCHA. Now, the argument is that money in NYCHA has been slowly leaving the city fund for many, many years, and that's because of the state and federal government and et cetera. But this isn't an issue about money. This is an issue about lying. Right. And you can't tell me that you lied about lead and mold because you didn't have money. And that's just unfair. What happened here in New York City was that the political powers that be put the lives of New York City residents in danger for the purposes of politics. We should have known about that report before the election. They withheld getting that information to us until after the election as to not affect the election. What did they know? When did they know it? Now, for those viewers that know me, I'm not that partisan guy that would come here on Perspectives to just launch attacks on Democrats. Most of my friends are Democrats. But what I'm pointing out is not only the danger of one-party rule, but if this mayor happened to have been a member of the Republican Party, the Independence Party, the Reform Party, or another party other than the majority party in New York City, heads would be rolling. There would be calls for criminal investigations. There would be call for a trial because people's lives were put in danger. The city even paid out a settlement towards a family whose child was impacted by these elevated lead in their units. So this is a real serious issue, and it really demands that the city pay careful attention to it. Now, kudos to two individuals that I want to give shout-outs to. First, Borough President Ruben Diaz has been at the forefront of this issue. He's been attacking the inefficiencies and the mismanagement at NYCHA for a very long time. And our Councilman Richie Torres, who has been phenomenal on this and who has been truly an independent thinker, demanding that the city do something about what's going on for the people that live in housing. So those two people need to be commended for what they've been doing.
So where do we go from here? Obviously, we know that there's a settlement that's actually been done. You talked about the possibility of heads rolling. Is there a possibility of a criminal investigation?
I don't know. I mean, this is always up to the powers that be. This is up to the prosecutors. This is up to the Department of Investigation. Look, we're dealing with prosecutors that are elected by the same party machine that these people are put in. Now, Cy Vance had to wait for the entire world to condemn sexual assault and rape under the campaign for Me Too to push for criminal charges against Harvey Weinstein. Remember, the issues of Harvey Weinstein came in long before the Me Too movement, and Cy Vance did nothing about it. It just so happens to be that Harvey Weinstein was a big Democratic Party contributor and a big Democratic Party contributor to all of his colleagues, that there was never an investigation. Now, you know, there may not be a nexus between the donations and the decisions not to prosecute a little earlier. But, I mean, for me to tell you that there isn't politics involved in these prosecutions, I'd be lying to you. There should be a clear investigation. The public advocate should be demanding change. The city should be demanding a trial be held against the people in charge of NYCHA who put the people's lives in danger. And quite frankly, the Department of Investigation needs to be investigated. Why did they unleash a report the week after the election? You knew about the corruption prior to Election Day, but you kept it under wraps as to not alter the election results. That's a fact, and you cannot lie to us about that. I mean, you would have to be a real fool to think that the Department of Investigation just happens to have stumbled upon this report and the damning falsified testing records a week after the election on real time. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, and so where do you see things going from here?
I don't know. I think that Richie Torres is going to demand heads roll, and I know that so is the borough president, and that's our only hope right now in the city to see change at NYCHA, period.
Yeah, as a person who grew up in NYCHA, I was born and raised in, St. Nicholas Project. So
Wow.
to see, hear, and to understand the plight of people who are really dealing with some of the worst conditions, lead. And once you are contracted with lead, the one thing about lead is once you are found with lead poisoning, that's it. There's no turning back. It doesn't leave your system. You can't get it out of your system. And for children who've been impacted by this, as you said, a settlement's already been given to a family who's actually dealt with this.
Yep, this is really tough. I mean, this is really sad. And to think that we're talking about the falsification of test results, that's what hurts the most. I mean, this is nefarious. For you to falsify and know about it and not let us know that this was happening during an entire election cycle, putting the lives of these kids further in danger. It's a real shame.
Yeah, we'll continue to follow this story, let you know a little bit more here on Perspectives. We want you to stay connected to us as we'll follow the NYCHA controversy as well. Turning now to national news, President Donald Trump once again in the news. His meeting with North Korean president, but also the disrespect given to the Canadian leader Trudeau. JC, first of all, what are we to make of this? Because it's been a historic meeting, historic from the place that some people feel like this should have never happened. But what are we to make of this meeting with Kim Jong-un? And has anything really substantive occurred in this?
I don't know if anything substantive occurred, but I do know that it's always better when we have an opportunity to sit down and talk about our differences other than launch attacks on Twitter about launching attacks, right? I mean, for a very long time, we were talking about whose button was bigger and how nuclear missiles work and fire and fury, and we're going to make it rain. And Kim Jong-un was talking about destroying Guam and the Hawaiian Islands and having missiles that will come into Chicago. That's very scary stuff because I know, like most Bronxites, I'm allergic to nuclear, you know?
Right.
So it's good whenever we have this opportunity to talk. So we're going to know about what's really there in a few months after Secretary Pompeo, I believe, and the North Korean government actually get to the details of whatever plan was signed a couple of days ago. I hope it was not just a photo op, but I think it's a good thing. The thing is here, where guys like me and most Bronxites, I think, that are more independent-minded want to know one thing. What's the difference between this and the Iran deal? You know, my side is very happy that the president met with the North Korean dictator, and that's fine. I mean, it's good for world peace and for hoping that we get some nuclear weapons out of the way. But the Iran deal was one in which we also focused on getting rid of nuclear weapons, and we trashed it, I mean, vehemently. And even now, President Trump decided to no longer participate in the Iran deal because we couldn't trust the actors that were involved, right, which was a big deal, even though Secretary Mattis said repeatedly that the verification of the Iran deal and the details to it were being met by the Iranian government. We still got out of it because it wasn't the right thing to do. My question is, what's the difference? I mean, some people on Twitter are saying, JC, $150 billion were given to Iran because of the Iran deal and $0 were given to North Korea. Well, not just quite the truth. First, North Korean state TV is reporting that the sanctions will be lifted against North Korea. They've been reporting that since last night at midnight Eastern time. Now, the $150 million payout that we talk about with the Iran deal was monies that we had frozen that was due to Iran for arms purchases in the last century. So it's not exactly as if we send $150 billion cash as here, sign here, and we'll give you some extra money. So I think it's important for us, especially those independent-minded Bronxites, to always think that sitting down and talking is always better than fighting. And in the case of the Iran deal, like the North Korea deal, I think both Democrats and Republicans have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, at what point do we stop the hypocrisy? And when do we start admitting that it's always best to sit down with our foes and settle on an idea or a plan to bring peace? And I think that we all win when our president sits down with our nemesis and comes up with a conclusion where we're not going to launch weapons at each other.
Does the United States win, though, given the fact that the president has taken on now Canadian President Trudeau, making the comments that he made? Everyone knows that Canada has been such a great ally. How do you meet with, Kim Jong-un, and then at the same time, one of the strongest allies that the United States has, you bash?
I can't explain it. I mean, other than this is his personality. Look, this guy ran a campaign for president, just like what we're seeing his presidency. Brash, hardcore, they say tell it like it is, but I call it rude. And he trashed NATO. He even, at one point, didn't even talk about, wouldn't even reject the plausibility of having missiles launched into Europe. I mean, this person had no concept of history or politics or how the New World Order was designed after World War II. This guy ran like this, so he's governing like that. He got elected doing it. A lot of his people still support him. I quite frankly don't understand it, and I can't defend it, other than I think he's in a position now where he looks at the dairy farmers in the United States and sees how they're paying high tariffs to get their products into the Canadian market. And he views that those dairy farmers are a part of his base, so he's going to do everything possible to stand up for them. And I think they love that. I think they love to see the president stand up for the people that believe that they have been victimized because of globalization. So I think there has to be something behind it, right?
There has to be. Well, that's why we bring you here to try to figure it out. We try to figure it out.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't figure it out, man.
We can't figure it out. But what we can figure out is we do need to take a break. Coming back after the break, we want to talk about the president. What kind of effect does the president have on local elections? It's very apparent that he does. We'll talk about that right after this.
can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen,
Double points with every purchase?
cleverly merging promotions,
Love it.
cross-referencing travel sites, and booking all your flights with those.
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh, but now they're like, aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
And we're welcoming you back to Perspectives. Our guest in studio, JC Polanco, as we're sharing a little bit about what is going on. The question I put before the break was, how much does President Donald Trump have an effect on local elections? And if you ask Mark Sanford of South Carolina, he'll say a whole lot.
Huge impact, especially in Republican primaries. You know, it's very interesting. You know, both parties have been held hostage to their bases. And those for those viewers that are, what is a base? A base are your more active voters, the people that come out and vote every primary, the people that come and attend your party meetings, go to fundraisers, knock on doors. Those people tend to be the biggest believers. These are the people that are very excited about what they believe the principles of that party are, or they are hardcore followers of whoever the leader of the party is. It just so happens that in this case, this is President Trump's party, and if you cross President Trump, chances are you're going to lose a Republican primary. I mean, without a doubt. We have seen several dozen Republicans retire, no longer want to seek re-election because at some point in their history, they have crossed this president. Either they didn't support his presidential campaign, they opposed his language on Twitter, they opposed something. They came out on a TV episode of something and said something not positive about the president. And because of that, they're almost guaranteed to face opposition in a party primary by someone who is to their extreme right, and that person will end up losing a primary, hands down. So far, we have lost, in the last 2 weeks, two Republican members of Congress have either lost their seats or fallen below 30% of the turnout for them on election night for their Republican primary. So this president is the decider of who wins these Republican primaries. And it's very interesting. It's not always the case. We saw in Roy Moore's case, he supported Roy Moore and Roy Moore lost.
Right.
But Roy Moore lost in a special election. It was a completely different animal. The next test to see how strong President Trump's endorsement in Republican primaries will be in Staten Island, Brooklyn, where we have a contentious GOP primary between incumbent Dan Donovan and former Congressman Michael Grimm. You know, President Trump is supporting Dan Donovan, the incumbent, against Michael Grimm. Michael Grimm had gone to prison on some charges, and he's now seeking his old seat back. We're going to see right now who wins that election on June 26th. It seems as if right now Michael Grimm is poised to win. The last polls had him up by 10 points. So seeing the president come in on Twitter and support Dan Donovan, let's see what happens on election day, see if he has that kind of pull in seats like the one out in San Antonio.
So do you feel him having a big effect on the midterm elections?
I think he's going to have a huge effect on the midterm election. I think if we continue to have the most extreme right-wing candidates win these primaries, they're unelectable on election day. You know, we see it in Virginia. Virginia just elected a white nationalist named Stewart to run against Tim Kaine for the U.S. Senate. This person's baggage is horrendous. He has so many skeletons in his closet, he might as well be a cemetery of racist things that this man has said. His support for Confederate statues is incredible. He's running against Tim Kaine. he's going to be one of many extreme right-wing white nationalists that are going to end up winning these primaries that are unelectable in November. And at the same time, the Democrats are going to have that same issue themselves. The Democrats are going to see their bases, their very left-leaning bases come out and support candidates that are unelectable in many districts across the country. So the Democrats may blow their opportunity to win the majority in the Senate and the House by allowing the base to get their way in electing people that are unelectable in November. It's a very interesting thing.
Very interesting thing. All right, well, listen, we want to thank JC for coming and sharing with us here. If the name Tim Kaine sounds familiar, the reason why it sounds familiar is because he was also Hillary Clinton's running mate. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in midterm elections. Stay with us. We got more perspectives coming up right after this.
We are together. And for the last 20 years, we have been building on a vision to share our views, our voices on our channels. We are the Bronx. We are BronxNet.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
And welcome back to Perspectives. Well, recently, most of America and the world came to a shock learning about the suicide deaths of both Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain. A lot of questions, a lot of topics. How does this happen? Warning signs. What do we miss? How can people who look like they've got it all together just take their life in a matter of moments? And so the topic of suicide has been a hot button issue across the United States. And on the other show that I host, Open, I had an opportunity to talk to Luis Lopez, who's a therapist, who wanted to share a little bit about the warning signs and have a conversation about suicide. And so we bring you that conversation here on Perspectives. And now joining us right here in studio is therapist Luis Lopez, who deals and talks about that issue of suicide. Thank you so much, Dr. Lopez, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Darren. It's a pleasure.
Listen, when we talked with the state senator, he said something that was kind of ironic. He said when it comes to the issue of suicide himself, his mother commits suicide. He himself, to this day, never has actually sought counseling himself to actually deal with it. And you think about that, and you think about, wow, something so tragic, and yet and still there are a lot of people who walk around with, as part of what we say the collateral damage, and really don't do anything to help themselves.
Unfortunately, that does happen a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why individuals choose not to go to counseling. Me, on the other hand, I strongly believe that in the counseling profession, I think that's a very good tool to help individuals process certain traumas and things that happen in their lives. And I hope that anyone who goes through something that tragic can actually reach out to someone for help.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about this, because we were taken aback last week when first was Kate Spade and then Anthony Bourdain. A short time ago, two major celebrities, the world definitely looks at them through a certain lens, and for many people, never seeing it coming. And that happens to be the case a lot of times with people who commit suicide. What are the warning signs that maybe we're missing here?
That's a good question. There's usually a behavior that changes in a person that lets you know that something's happening. Someone who's actively engaged in certain activities and all of a sudden now they're isolating, they're withdrawing, they're doing certain things. It's typically an indicator that something is wrong and that person may be in need of help.
I want to take a look at some statistics that are going to be coming to the screen right now that gives you an understanding about suicide and how the numbers continue to rise. And we're going to throw that up so that way you get an opportunity to see it. And then we're going to ask Dr. Lopez to share a little bit with us here about it. But there you see the numbers that are actually rising. and suicides in America, 45,000 since 2016. Died without no mental condition. If you see the numbers now in dark blue, they reflect people who died with no without a no medical condition, and that number continues to increase by 38 to 58%. And so when we look here, and we're seeing some of the states, and actually they're actually up getting close towards the Midwest and moving towards the West. What can we make of this? It's alarming. These numbers, these statistics are alarming. And according to the same study, it says that more than half of the people who have committed suicide do not have a mental health condition, as you just indicated. It's typically related to life stressors like loss of job, issues with renting, issues with money, other problems that the person or individual is not able to cope with. And possibly because they may have a fear to seek help, they don't know how to deal with this and figure that maybe ending their life or being hopeless is the way that they can deal with a situation, which is absolutely tragic. I think there's a lot of help for individuals out there. It's just a question of reaching out and getting in contact with somebody. Well, we talk about in communities of color, there's always this stigma about therapy. And unfortunately, a lot of people will not come across your doors because it feels like there's, a stigma that's associated. Talk to people out there who may be watching and saying, listen, you need to talk to somebody. I just had a conversation with a group of people yesterday, and I said to them, I said, talking is good. Absolutely, I agree. Talking is absolutely good. Unfortunately, there is a stigma. I don't know why individuals feel that if you speak to a professional is an indication of who you are or an indication that you're weak. I think on the contrary, I think that the saying two heads are better than one. I think this principle would apply when it comes to therapy. An individual may come to a session to speak to a professional with a particular problem and may not understand how to deal with it, but then the professional who actually trained for this can have a suggestion that can help the person deal with whatever stressor they're dealing with. So I personally believe that seeking therapy or seeking a professional or counseling for any particular life stressor is definitely a positive, it's definitely a plus, it's something that should be taken advantage of. Well, people who are my generation, a little bit older, we grew up in that household that said, listen, what goes on in the house stays in the house, right? And so you keep it to yourself. And unfortunately, we find that a lot of people walk around and carry this stuff with them until they reach a breaking point. But talk to us about what are some of the things that can be done that could possibly prevent things such as this happen. I mean, when you look at these two people who are high profile, the question that rings out, what could have been done to prevent this? What? Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the things that individuals can do if you feel that you are struggling with certain stressor, there are hotlines that you can call, the National Suicide Hotline. There's some websites you can visit. I believe the CDC has launched a website called BeTheFirst2.com where it shows you and talks about certain techniques and certain ways that you can help individuals. And if you're a student, you can speak to your guidance counselor. If you're an adult, I'm sure there's several behavior clinics around your neighborhood that you can stop by. Or even speak, if you're a religious individual, maybe speak to your pastor or your religious leader for support. So there's plenty of things that can be done. You can even call 311 and they can guide you to different venues that can give you support for whatever stress or situation you're dealing with. And that was my conversation with Luis Lopez, therapist, dealing with the issue of suicide. And for anyone who is dealing with the issue of suicide, we encourage you to contact the CDC or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, that 800 number, so that way you can call. If you know someone who may be in ways that may harm themselves, or you're just trying to deal with it or overcome it as a family member, and you've had someone that's been connected or you've been affected in some kind of way, it's always important to pick up the phone and call somebody because there's somebody that you can talk to in situations like that. Well, this about wraps it up for this edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for watching. For all of us here on the set of Perspectives, until next time we meet, stay safe, share your perspective with somebody else, because you really don't know. It just might make a difference in someone else's life. Take care and God bless.
What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keep it